We are your landlords, flooding and tapping out so that you don't have to, with the occasional screw. It happens. My name is Graham. I go by Hamhocks42 on the internet, and I'm joined by the one and only Astralsflame. Astrals, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good, Ham. I'm doing pretty good. You know, it's been a few weeks since our last recording, but has it ever been a heck of a few months between travel, New Year's, literally the Ham Hawks World Tour I heard was been going around, and the autographs that Colossal Hammer have been hamming out.
I
Pretty
mean,
fun.
I have been handing out some colossal autographs. That is true.
Yeah, I'm doing good, man.
Yeah,
You doing good?
I am doing good. I did attend my very first convention, and I don't even add any qualifiers. It wasn't just my first Magic convention. It wasn't just my first convention as a creator. It was literally my first convention
Well, it
of
was
any
baby's
kind.
first con.
That was baby's first con, was
Oh my
MagicCon
god!
Philadelphia, and I have to say it was amazing. The venue was perfect. There were free play tables everywhere. It was funny. There were so many amazing things going on, and I found myself just finding tables and just playing Commander with a bunch of amazing people all the time. Like that's all basically my whole weekend was just hanging out and playing Commander with people that I knew from the internet who I got a chance to like meet in person and just jam with. And it was great. I got to say, there's something about talking to a fellow streamer and being able to use my voice and then they use their voice. It's like we've had so many conversations, but we've never done it like this before. This is neat.
It's like
Yeah.
that interaction. It's like
Mm-hmm.
in person. There's
Yeah.
connection.
It's a beautiful thing. Well, I had that moment where I was chatting with the Nerdy Steve at one point, and I realized, like, wait, I've been in your chat and I've typed to you and you've talked back, and you've been in my chat and you've typed to me and I've talked back. Like, we're actually talking. This is fun. I like this. Yeah, let's do this more often. This is neat. So
It's a
I can't wait
surreal
for the next
feeling.
one. Yeah, but it was definitely all about Commander for me
Yes.
anyway. Like my experience in that weekend, I was playing Commander constantly, and I brought a ton of decks of varying power levels. And it was also fun because I got to hang out with my buddy Ephraim, aka Hollywood Pizza, another streamer and tournament organizer, who's a great dude. And he and I hung out the whole weekend. It was awesome. Like, yeah, it was a fun situation. But he didn't have Commander decks of his own, so he got to borrow mine, and we played together in a lot of pods. And it was fun to watch and not only like play the decks that I brought, but watch them be played by others, which is something that was really eye-opening and pretty cool. And I think that kind of like dovetails into the topic that we wanted to discuss today, our first listing, if you will. Yeah. So if you want to, I don't know,
Yeah.
tee that up, feel free. Or
I can
yeah, by all
par for
means.
course here.
I'm gonna point. I'm gonna ruin the transition by pointing out how smooth it was. And
we're all about smooth transitions and smooth sales on our listing here. That's what we're paid for. I pay Ham and Ham pays me. We pay each other in high fives right now. That's our
exactly. Oh yeah.
net profit.
Oh yeah.
We're-
The conversion rate on high fives to dollars, not amazing, but we're working on it.
It's getting there. You know what? Soon it'll be to the moon. Like this topic's gonna take you. Deck building philosophy for multitudes of formats. What is a deck building
Absolutely.
philosophy? What is it about? What does it entail? You might be like, well, deck building, it's super easy. I put this in, I put this in, I got my 4 ofs, I got my 3 ofs, I got my 1 of. But it differs so much between formats. I mean, Ham, correct me if I am wrong in this statement, but how we build decks in Standard entirely differs to how we build them to Commander, to even how we build them for Explorer, or, as our last episode, Casual.
Oh, 100%. It makes it's vastly different. And I think a big part of that comes in from whenever you're sitting down to build a deck, you have to ask yourself, what is the experience that I want to have when I play this deck? And so for me, when I'm playing in Standard or Explorer, kind of if I'm playing on Arena, I'm expecting that experience is going to be one type of experience. And in general, my goal is to win. I want to get my daily wins. I want to get my weekly wins. I want to make sure I'm gathering all that gold and experience. But also, I'm not going to have a personal connection with the other player. Like the format, the application just isn't really designed for that. Like there is no chat. Like the emotes are there, but honestly, like they're kind of lackluster. So I don't expect to have a personal connection with the other person. I'm just going to play my game. I'm going to expect that they're going to play theirs, and I assume going in that our goal is to win, and that's going to be that. There is etiquette about solo playing and whatnot, but for the most part, I kind of assume especially if I'm on the rank ladder, like you're gonna bring what you believe is a really good deck. I'm gonna try to be creative with some of my deck builds. I want to have kind of a unique experience and let the deck do something different. That's usually what I try to bring. That's something that I enjoy, and as a content creator, that's part of the brand, you know. But for the most part, that's what I like doing in Magic anyway. So I'm still doing that, but my goal is to win. You know, like there are a number of cards out there that are just a little too slow, or maybe their stats are a little too low for their mana cost. So even if it has a cool ability, I just can't run it because I just can't win with that card. You know? Whereas in other formats, especially in physical formats where I'm sitting across the table from somebody, and definitely Commander, when I'm sitting down to build a deck, I want to create an experience on the board. And honestly, my goal isn't even to win. I'm trying to have fun. Like that's first and foremost. And I want to have a fun experience with people. And so as I'm crafting that deck, I want to make sure that the elements that I put into it are going to help everybody have fun. Like one of my favorite cards in Commander by a mile that I put in like almost all my decks. Actually, I think I've run out of copies because I have too many decks and not enough copies of this card is Howling Mine. It's a colorless 2-drop that lets everybody draw extra cards. And I don't run it with ways to tap it. You know, like there are ways to tap it down so that you draw extra cards that nobody else does, and that's kind of a spiky move, and like it's a good strategy. Like I'm not saying it's bad, but I'll run it in decks where that isn't the plan at all, and I'll just throw it out there, and it's like, all right, everybody get some more cards. Let's see what you got. Let's play the game. You know, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to draw into their mana so that their deck can do whatever they want their deck to do, so that we're all having fun and smiling. Does that mean my opponents have a higher probability of beating me? Yes, it does. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what that format is about.
Yeah, you want to see.
How about you?
Well, I guess I'm kind of the same because I was going to say like you want to see what a player does. You want to see what the deck does because it's all about the experience. And like I'm similar for my Commander philosophy in that way too. I don't put Howling Mind in a lot of decks but along that same stratagem of wanting to sort of not help myself only but help the table, I'll do Descent into Avernus. I'll give everybody treasure. Let's make this game suddenly 4 turns. Show me as crazy as you've got. And I like sometimes my stuff's a little bit crazier, other times not so much. But like if I get blown out by my own Descent to Avernus, I'm like, cool. I got to see like a 10-mana spell in turn 5. This is pretty sweet. But yeah, no, same kind of logic. Like for Commander for the philosophy, I'm looking for a good time. Winning is like a side thing. Like I'll have a deck, it'll have to have its win con because the game needs to end. But I'm looking for a good time in that. But for standard explorer, like on ladder, in arena, or in a competitive format, no, it is to win. I need my decks optimized. I play them the best I can. Sometimes there's a weird couple includes because it'll catch people off guard. But the philosophy between me, it's like Commander built for the fun. Standard on arena, we build the win.
I respect that. I do. Yeah, a lot of times what I'll do when I'm building for standard, I'll come up with an idea. And like sometimes the idea is great. Or sometimes the idea is neat. And you have that question of like, okay, is this like good neat or is this like meme neat? Like, is this something that is actually going to help me win games if I go this route? Or do I want to do it so that I can say I did it?
I love that there's like tiers of D.
Both are viable, but I'm that guy who will put like a goofy combination that requires 2 different 5-drops to be on the battlefield and then a 6-drop in my hand and then be pissed when my deck loses. Like, what did I expect? Like, you know, like, of course, I'm not going to get Drivnod and Mondrak and Retandravik on the field every single game. Like, when I do, it's awesome, but that's going to be, a smaller amount of the games. And that's okay. Like, I'm trying to do a big dumb thing. I need to accept that, okay, when I'm trying to do this big dumb thing, maybe I'm trying to do it for a YouTube video. Maybe we're trying to have some fun on stream. I need to accept that, like, I'm going to lose a lot of these games. Like, I just am. It's how it goes. And that needs to be okay if that's the plan. But yeah, for the most part, if I'm doing standard, a lot of times what I'll try to do is I'll come up with an idea and I'll try to craft what I think is a good, at least 60 card deck, for best of 1 or a full 75. And I'll try to put together what I think should work and then play it a little bit, get some information. And based on how those games go, I'll try to come to a conclusion. Usually after I've played 5 or 6 games, I try to look back and think, okay, did this not work because these aren't the right support pieces for what I'm trying to do, which is sometimes the case, and maybe you just need to tune it and you can find an angle that makes it work. Or does this not work because the idea is fundamentally flawed? You know, and sometimes that's true too. And it's unfortunate when that happens, but it is what it is, you know, and sometimes there is something to be said for scrapping a deck and moving on to the next idea, because they're not all going to be winners, and that's okay. Yeah.
Kind of leads to an interesting thought though, because like when we say deck building philosophy, we kind of touched on, you know, the premise of how we want to build a deck. We kind of branch into how we structure deck and how we tune a deck. I also want to bring in the point here that a philosophy, while it's very general, it encompasses a lot more than just those few points too. Like the actual deck structure. So the term hedging, right? Putting in 2s and 3s and 1-0s to get you the best flexibility of what you're going to run into is another deck building philosophy. I'm a hedger. You've seen my list. I do the 2s and 3s out the wazoo. I get critiqued a lot about it, like, why do you do this 1-of run in the main? And this 2 of Gix's command. Why don't you just do the 4 set? Like, I'm a hedger. I find that gives me the flexibility. That's part of my deck building philosophy. What's your philosophy in that sense? Do you hedge? Or are you now? It's 4-ofs always, 24, 25 lands. This new Cadillac's gonna sell itself.
I'm more the latter, I'll be honest.
Really?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
you and I have very different approaches to that. And you know, I usually run 4-ofs. I try to identify what do I believe are going to be the best cards in this deck, and I'll run 3 or 4 of those cards. And so that with the hope of like the point of doing that is to make sure my decks are more consistent. But, you know, I'm more likely to draw the same cards over and over again. That does get me into trouble, however, when um when I find myself in a situation where the cards in my deck cannot help me on the board presence that I'm in. So one example of that is one kind of a key example of hedging, which I'm learning the benefits of hedging. I'm starting to do it more and more. You'll see more 2-ofs in my lists these days than I had previously, and I'll even occasionally put in the 1-of here and there. I don't do that often, but
I'll take
sometimes.
it. It's a start. I'll take it.
Yeah, sometimes. But it's funny, if you look at my deck lists that I post now, or like if you look at my Untapped now compared to like 6 months ago, they're very different. But the reason that I try to have a large quantity is just, yeah, consistency. I want to make sure. But like, sorry, one example, removal. If I'm in a black deck and I need a 2-mana removal spell, right now in Standard, we have a couple of really good options.
Oh, yeah.
2 of which that I want to focus on. We have Go for the Throat, which is awesome and is a very common option. And then we also have Infernal Grasp, which is also really cool, but you have to lose life in order to use it. Well, and so a lot of times I'll like, well, I need a 2-mana removal spell. I'll put 4 Go for the Throats, and I'm just gonna send it. Let's go. And then all of a sudden, my opponent plays a Phyrexian Fleshgorger, and I'm looking at 2 Go for the Throats in my hand, going, man, what I wouldn't give for one of these to be an Infernal Grasp right now. You know, knowing full well it's gonna dome me for 5 after I pay the ward cost on Fleshgorger, but still getting that thing off the board, 100% worth it. I just need to do it. You know, it's funny how that works out, right? Like, yeah, so if you're gonna put a 4-of something, it needs to be critical for your deck to function, or it needs to be incredibly flexible. Like one piece of removal that I would recommend putting 4-of in like controlling Esper decks is Void Rend. It's one that a lot of people aren't running right now, but it can hit any non-land permanent. That's a lot of stuff that you can hit, and you get a round ward because it can't be countered, which is rad. So, like, anyway, but it's incredibly flexible, and it has to be. You know, you see that with counter spells too. It's like, should I run Essence Scatter or should I run Negate? It's like, well, how about I run Make Disappear, and it's just good in the early game, and it's a little less good in the late game, and here we are. You know, but it can hit anything. It's like, well, that's well, and in a lot of cases, you'll find people running control decks where they'll have like 2 Essence Scatter, 3 Make Disappear, and 2 Negates or whatever. Like, because and a couple of Disdainful Strokes in there too, because you just don't know, and you need to be ready for any situation. So yeah, I've learned the values of hedging, but at the same time, how many times have you really wanted, you know, one of those 1-ofs or 2-ofs that are in your deck, and you only have 2 of them or 1 of them? So
Like,
it's kind of double-edged sword. It goes both ways, kind of. Well,
it does, but I mean, when I'm running the
yeah,
2-0s in a list, personally, all I do is just believe on the heart of the cards, and I just top deck it. I don't know why people just don't top deck better when they're hedging. I mean, it really doesn't make sense to me. You
that
should
actually makes
just
yeah.
top deck better.
You know, I think you might be onto something there. It's funny. That's actually that right there is actually one of the key points that was a major moment for me. I was looking at, I think I was not this last World Championship, but the one prior to that. I
Mhm.
remember looking at their deck lists, and I saw a whole bunch of like one ofs and like one or two ofs in the sideboard, and it's just like I remember looking at it, it's like, okay, these are like some of the best players in the world. I'm certainly not about to tell them they're doing it wrong, but like, what this is so different from the way I build my decks. Why are they doing this? And I realized a big part of it is, well, if you just need one particular card,
Yep.
there is a 0% chance you're going to draw it if you don't have one in the deck. Like, well, so having that one of gives you that potential, like, low probability out, you know, and sometimes it happens. And like on top of that, like if you need one piece of removal or one particular counter spell, maybe your one of spell pierce is sitting in your hand for the first 4 turns and you never have an opportunity to rip it, but your opponent tries like taps out for that invoke despair, and then you have it.
Juicy.
And it's a like, you know, but you wouldn't have had it if you didn't have the one in the deck. Like it's a dead card in your hand for until you hit the right situation. But knowing that those situations happen, yeah, that's another thing that's huge. One of the things that I do a lot is talk with people who are new to the game in one way or another,
Mhm.
and trying to explain to people why certain cards are good and when they aren't. You know, because there are certain situations where you might look at a card like, I don't know, like Feed the Serpent from Kaldheim. You know, it's
Great.
2
That's a good
black
example.
black, exile target creature or planeswalker at instant speed, no less. Like it's a good card, but I'm not running it in anything, and I don't plan to ever. And people might like people would ask, like, but it exiles like anything. It's really good, right? And it's like, well, kind of like you can hit creatures and planeswalkers. It's good, but there are better options. This costs 4 and it requires 2 black. You know, so when are the situations when you want this? And in those situations, would Hero's Downfall be better or Shieldred's Edict be better?
Yep.
Chances are probably yes. You know, like I have a feeling that because these are cheaper and they accomplish the same goal most of the time, you're going to have better success running these in your deck over that. You know, and so it's not that it's a bad card, it's just there are better. You know, and it's funny actually, Infernal Grasp, it was a key piece of removal that appeared in every black deck for months. And then the moment Go for the Throat showed up, I stopped seeing it.
Yeah.
Like Go for the Throat and Cut Down showed up, and then all of a sudden people just stopped running Infernal Grasp in most of their main decks. Like there were just better options all of a sudden.
There
You
were.
know? Yeah. Not that Infernal Grasp is bad, it's still great, but
Kind
you don't
of
need it anymore.
like, so talking about card selection and stuff, and the
Mhm.
difference of like 4-0s and hedging, do you often find that the type of deck you're building will determine if a deck is going to be hedged or if it's going to be 4-0?
Oh,
Because
100%.
if we
Yeah.
look at the eyes of a new player, and I'm not going to
Mhm.
say like every new player is all the same because that is a very bad blanket statement, but if a new player enter into the game, a simple way for a player to enter in is look at a net deck, and a lot of the times it'll be something in the virtue of a 1 to 2 color deck that follows the principle: here are my 4-0s, here it's good. And that philosophy definitely works in a lot of circumstances, but the strategy isn't always supported by that, right? Like there are
Mhm.
times when a deck is just going to be better when it's a hedge deck versus a 4-0 deck.
Oh, 100%. Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, and I think it comes down to a couple of key details. One is how many cards is the deck going to see throughout the course of a game? Like you'll notice mono red decks have a ton, like throughout history. This isn't like new to just the one we have in standard right now, but like mono red decks have a ton of 4-ofs and like very few, if any, 2-ofs. Like it's like 4s and 3s all the way down. Because if the mono red deck, and I'm talking about like low to the ground, like
Mhm.
super fast like burn strategies. I'm not necessarily referring to big red, which is pretty cool in its own right, but that's a different philosophy. But like the tournament like super fast mono red slide decks, like those, if you're successful and you have killed your opponent by turn 4 or 5, if you had a little stutter but you made it happen, if that has happened, you've seen 10 cards, Like
Pretty
maybe a
much.
dozen. Like you've seen very few cards, and so you need your efficient threats every game. And so you want to have a ton of super cheap efficient threats, and you're going to need to draw some of them. You'll also notice those decks run very few lands. You'll see 17 or 18 lands, which is generally way too few. But that deck can kill you with 2. So, like, and
Yep.
and if it draws too many, they're going to lose. Like,
Get that.
and so you need to be aware of that when you're setting that deck up. Now, if I'm playing with a deck that's designed to go into the later game, like if it's more of a mid-range or a control deck, I'm far more likely to have 1-ofs or 2-ofs in that deck, along with cards that let me draw cards or look at cards, like with scries and whatnot. Because then I have more options within the deck itself, and I get to select what those are throughout the course of the game. That is very helpful. Honestly, like Yorion is a companion that was just ubiquitous in those decks to the point where it actually got banned in Modern. Because honestly, because the downside to Yorion was that you had to run at least 20 more cards.
Yes. Downside.
Yeah, you had to run.
Downside.
Yeah, big ol' air quotes on downside. You had to run, in a 60 card format, you had to run 60 cards. Also, fun fact: the way that Yorion is worded, it says that your starting deck needs to have at least 20 more than the minimum number of cards in your starting deck. Which meant if you wanted Yorion to be your companion in limited, you had to have a 60 card deck, which is kind of funny. And because of the rules of Commander, Yorion kind of banned themselves out of the companion slot anyway in Commander.
A little bit, yeah.
Because in Commander, you have to play a 99 card main deck. You do not have another choice. So you cannot make it a 119 card deck. You're not allowed to. Therefore, you just can't run Yorion as your companion, which is kind of fun. In any event, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. But the downside of running 80 cards in your main deck in a control deck, that wasn't a problem at all, because you're running Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. You're running cards like Silver Scrutiny or Memory Dealers that are just going to give you access to a whole bunch of cards.
Yep.
And you get a chance to pick whatever you want, look at them. In a lot of cases with scries and like loot effects where you're drawing and discarding, you could choose whatever you wanted to keep. And so the number of cards that a control player looks at in any game, whether they're successful or not, frankly, is so much higher than what a lot of aggro players are going to see, just by virtue of how the decks work, like how they play. I mean, even if you think about it, like let's say I'm playing like a mono green aggro or a Gruul aggro situation. I'm dropping creatures, like all the cards in my hand are becoming creatures and they're attacking. If my opponent is playing control, what's their turn 1? Opt, consider. Like they're looking at multiple cards, drawing additional cards. Then they follow it up with an impulse, survey, whatever the 2-drop. They're looking at more cards. So even by turn 3, they've looked at additional like 6-7 cards more than I've seen in the entire game. And that's only going to continue as the game goes on. So those decks can run fewer for us. You just, actually it's funny. A lot of the time in Azorius control specifically, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria is the best card in those decks in a lot of situations.
100%,
like,
yeah.
If it sticks, they're gonna win. Like the amount of card advantage it gives you is insane. It also prevents damage going face because you have to redirect some of it over to deal with Teferi pretty much every time. Like, so it's one of those cards that like when it hits, like I've seen control mirrors where like a Teferi will resolve and the other person will scoop. Because it's like, I know I can't win. It is like with that on the board, you're going to get too much advantage. There are no win conditions on this board, and they might even have some more interaction in hand, like some pounces or some wraths or something. And they just know, like, I cannot be that guard, so I'm going to leave, which is fair. Like, that's a fair assessment of the situation. But Teferi, Hero of Dominaria in a lot of those Azorius control decks is a 3-of.
Yes.
Not a 4, which is wild to me. Meanwhile, Shark Typhoon, which is another like top end finisher, that's a 4-of in a lot of situations because it has the cycle mode.
Yeah, the flexibility on it.
That's huge. So if you have it in the early game, a thing that I've also seen as somebody who plays almost exclusively like mid range and like goofy combo decks. I'm not a control player. I've tried it a number of times and like it can be fun, but for the most part, I really am bad at it. Like I'll be honest. One of the things I've seen a lot of people do is cycle Shark Typhoon on 2. So they don't get a shark, or it comes in as a 0/0 and dies immediately. Like I almost never do that when I have if I'm looking at it and I don't have a turn 2 play, except for maybe a counter spell, and they go to their end step and I have a Shark Typhoon in hand, I always hold it. always. Even though, like, the truth is you need to see more cards if you're in those decks. And so that's not the right play. Anyway, not to do with deck building, but a little bit of an aside. The philosophy of playing that deck is very different. So that's the other thing you'll notice, like, be aware of your play style. That's very important. Yeah, be aware of what you enjoy doing and what you're good at doing. I have found, like, there have been a lot of Jund Reanimator decks over the last couple of months that have kind of come and gone in Standard. And I have noticed, not to toot my own horn necessarily, but for me, I can take a Reanimator strategy and I will get a higher percentage than a lot of the other people playing Reanimator strategies because I know that strategy. It's what I enjoy doing. The balance of what cards do I have in my hand, what's in my graveyard, what does my opponent have that can manipulate my graveyard, and how can I prevent it? Like, that is a line of thinking and resource management that I'm used to because I do it all the time. And so I'm more comfortable with that strategy. And so I've noticed, like, a lot of times there can be a 50%, Reanimator deck in Standard that is kind of okay, but definitely tier 2. And I can get a 60% win rate with it, whereas other people just struggle because it's just, I'm familiar with it. Meanwhile, when I play Control, I can take the best Control list out there. And I'm gonna take a 60% win rate Azorius Control list, and I'm gonna get 40 with it and be kind of frustrated.
Me too.
And I know that. So I don't play those decks mostly. And when I do try to build Control decks, a lot of the time, even in my stream titles, it'll even be like, laugh at me as I try to play Control. Like, I own it. Like, I know I'm not good at this, but I'm gonna try. Let's see what we got. Because I want to be a well-rounded player. But so when you're building your decks, be aware of what resources you have out there and what you like to do, and play to your strengths. Build your decks to your strengths. Know what you like and what's going to be good in your hands, and put that in your deck. That is really important.
It is. Like, a deck building philosophy doesn't just define how the deck is, your approach to the number of cards and number of lands. It encompasses all of these topics. You can think of it like a process plan in a way. And I say process plan because I do like logical work in engineering. So everything has to be in a process and follow a flow. But in a philosophy, you can follow that same kind of way. Your philosophy is going to have the strategy you want to do, the type of cards you want to have to make that strategy function, the number of lands you need to have that strategy playable, the number of types of cards that you maybe need to dig down in the deck, have play, and have access to make everything flow together. How the deck is going to actually end up playing out, revise and retest it. So a philosophy isn't always just going to be like the one thing of how the construction works. The philosophy is very much the whole entire process until a deck is complete. And a deck is never complete. So there we go. We just went infinitum there. The deck philosophy is forever.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, it is. It's true. It's never complete. I have never gotten to a point where I looked at a list and it's like, cool, we're done. And Commander players everywhere know this. And when a new set comes out, they look at new cards and realize, oh, that would be great in this deck. And like, a lot of players will adapt and tune previous decks based on new cards. Which, I mean, Standard players everywhere. That's the nature of the format. You kind of have to do that, otherwise you're gonna get left behind. But yeah, like, every format, you see people doing that. Where it's what's the new thing that can change the way that I approach this deck and tweak it in a little bit in a certain way. And yeah, and even without new cards being introduced, as tastes shift, as metas shift, you might find, like, if people stop playing Phyrexian Fleshgorger tomorrow, which I don't think it's ever going to happen, but like, if they don't, maybe all of a sudden you need fewer braids. Maybe you need, maybe you can put in more Go for the Throats instead of the Infernal Grasps, and be aware of that. And as the meta shifts, you can make adjustments to make your decks more optimal in those situations. But always be flexible, always be adapting. If you pick up honestly, I bet if either of us went back and grabbed a deck that we played 3 months ago and tried to play it on the ladder today, I don't know about you, but I know mine would get smoked. Like, it's not even close.
I can think of one that might be okay. And
okay.
I say might as in it might get like 50% of the win, because the way I built 3 months ago in that meta is very different from the cards are the difference. So I'm building my strategy and philosophy still the same because I hedge, but the card choices back then to now, I would have to approach the deck differently for what I want to target in the meta. Because like this isn't really a philosophy thing, but it's an approach idea. I keep as a standard player as we do have to adapt and keep flow of things. I've been on like a kick of Dreams of Steel and Oil lately. That's like a thing I've been just crazy about lately. And like that's a new adaptation of philosophy for me because I'm like, I'm targeting different things and changing up the flow of my deck. But 3 months ago, I didn't touch the card. I thought it was like, oh, that's kind of okay. But like
Right.
now, big difference now.
Well, and the big reason there is Atraxa. Like, but
Yes.
you're exactly right. Like, and yeah, Dreams of Steel and Oil is a great example of that. Wherein before, like, if you hit a Dreams of Steel and Oil on one and you happen to get your opponent's Sheldred, okay, cool. Like, that's a good hit. You got good value. Neat. But the chance of whiffing is way too high. Meanwhile, the fact that it can hit the graveyard and the hand, if you hit it early against an Atraxa deck, even if they've successfully put Atraxa in their graveyard in the hopes of reanimating her, you can still get her out of there.
Yeah, she's gone.
She gone, baby. And even if they have an extra one in their hand, you get to hit them both. It's great. Like, yeah, no, I believe, right? It is both, right? Or am I?
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's both. It's exile from hand, and then if there is something in the graveyard, exile from the graveyard. It's literally a two. I'm gonna say it's a 3-for-1 because hand information, hand exile, graveyard exile.
Huge.
It's like huge Thoughtseize to me.
It's so good. Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. No, that card is amazing. And that's power creep with when it comes to hand disruption, totally. But we can take advantage of it now that there are targets that are worth hitting. To the point where you could probably, I mean, it's definitely a sideboard card. I feel like you might even be able to run it main, given how many big nasty creatures and artifacts there are running around out there right now.
Yeah, I think they're depending on your deck building philosophy. Depending on your deck building philosophy, you could certainly put it in as either a main board or sideboard. I've done a mix depending on the deck. My deck has influenced my choice of it being main board or sideboard.
Perfect. I love it.
So there you go.
Yeah.
See, look at that. Perfect example of deck building philosophy and the evolution of adaptation. You look at your deck, you look at your strategy, you look at the type of environment you're in, the format you're targeting, how you want the deck to play and how you want to play the deck. And ultimately what the deck is going to accomplish to do or try and target. All of these continually factor into philosophy, and the philosophy ever grows and adapts because a deck is never refined or perfect. A deck is only going to be optimized further and further in continuing evolution.
Love it. Yeah. Very cool. And yeah, with that, I believe that we are going to go ahead and bid you all a very fond adieu. That I feel like we've covered it pretty well. I mean, you know me, I could ramble on for hours about this, and I do. You can see me rambling on for hours about Magic the Gathering over on twitch.tv/Hamhocks42. I also have my own YouTube channel where I talk about individual cards a lot, as well as a lot. Like if you think, man, this guy never shuts up, that's correct. And if you want to see me never shut up, yeah, over on YouTube, Hamhocks42. So Astros, how about you, my friend? Where can people find you on the internet? And what can they expect to find when they get there?
Yeah, so y'all can find me at Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Astralsflame. I'm mostly playing MTG Arena. I'm switching on my schedule a little bit, though. So we are now adding Skyweaver to our Tuesday night streams and Valorant on Friday nights and Saturday nights, despite the fact my first Valorant stream went bad because I haven't touched the game in a year and a half. It was bad, but it's fine.
Oh, no.
It's fine. I'm taking this week to practice and relearn, so I'm re-embracing my FPS heritage roots because I used to be a big FPS player some 12 years ago. God, it's been so long. But anyways, yeah, you can find me doing that. I'm also working on a partner push Twitch, so we'll see how that goes.
And what that means, dear listener, dear viewer, is that if you see Astralsflame live on Twitch, please open up that browser and even just have a tab open. You can mute it, whatever, but like just be present and help, because in order to get partner on Twitch, you do need an average of 75 concurrent viewers throughout the entire time you've been live for the last 30 days. And if that sounds like a lot, it is. It absolutely is. And yeah, the Astrals. By the way, I gotta say, I'm just gonna say this: your streams are awesome. This isn't in the script. He's not making me say this, but like, if you want just a cool, chill time to enjoy some fun action in Magic and now other games, but even if the gameplay is bad, the vibes are great. So like,
I try.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I've actually there have been so many nights when I've come home from work and been like, all right, I really should go to bed. Oh wait, Astro's on. I'll just hang out for a little bit before I know it's midnight. Like, wait, what happened? Yeah, it's a really good time. So definitely check them out, everybody. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
And if you're looking for the best bacon frying places around with the flying hammers and all the greatest bacon grease times, and when I say grease, I mean we get into the greasy combos to pull things off. This isn't grease fang rats. This is the frying good action you love. If you are a bacon flipper in the morning, crispy or fried Hamhocks as you covered. So don't delay. Check out Hamhocks every morning starting at 7:30 a.m. EST, Monday to Friday. Twitch.
That's true. Thank you.
And with that, friends, make sure you drop us a follow and subscribe to keep up to date on all the latest landlord actions. You can follow us on YouTube and Twitter. And with that, until next time, we are your landlords.